Was hoping to go home this weekend. I don't know if John said he would let me know if this has happened. I don't know if this has happened. So, hey, no news is good news. So, but she was doing much better. She's actually in really recuperating well. They think they may have figured out the issues that she was having, and there you go. Let's see. Let me think for just a couple seconds. Need to remember Ann Wesley. I don't know if they've gone down to Alabama or not. I haven't heard whether they've gone down there. But Ann's brother, Obi, passed away. Yeah, he passed away. Obi. So he had been in the hospital and been in some serious health conditions. But he passed away. But I don't. When I talked to Ann, she did not have a schedule for any kind of service, so we don't know what's going on with service. Let's see. But keep that family and especially his brother in mind, because his brother was the one that moved in the same nursing home right down the door, a couple doors down from him, and that's what's been able to keep the two of them very happy. But now Obi has passed, so they've got that issue to work with. I don't know what they're going to do with his brother. He'll likely stay in the same spot. Let's see. I don't know if anybody else got anyone else that we need to remember in our prayers. Millie, she was here last Sunday, but it's kind of a, you don't know if she's going to be here or not. But keep her in mind. She's just not feeling well. So when she comes, it's an ordeal. It's an event for her. So, anybody else? Okay. Mm-hmm. Her daughter has cataract. Yep. Yep. Anybody else? Anything else? We'll go ahead and have a word of prayer and then we'll start with class. Father in heaven, we're thankful for the day and all of our blessings. Thank you, Lord, for the day that you blessed us with. And we ask, Lord, that you continue to watch over us, provide for us. We ask, Lord, that you be with those that we mentioned who are sick and who are undergoing procedures and treatments. We pray, Lord, that your blessings are on them. Help them to get better very soon. Help them come back to be with us once again. We ask, Lord, that you continue to provide for us the daily things that we need. We ask, Lord, that you continue to love us. We ask that you, Lord, bless those who are spiritually sick and are grieving. We ask, Lord, that you bless those who have lost loved ones, especially be with Miss Ann as she's lost her brother. Be with her other brother as well, as he's lost a very good friend and a companion. And we pray, Lord, that you bless them as they go down for the services for Obi Johnson. Lord, bless this congregation. Help us to grow. Show us what you want us to do. We stand ready to work, and we know, Lord, need your guidance and we need your assistance. Bless us through our study. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, Joshua chapter 2. Joshua chapter 2. Joshua, the book of Joshua is a compilation. It's more of a narrative than it is anything else, as we said last week. Many people believe that it was not written around the time that the events occurred. It was it was written closer to the time of many people believe even King Josiah. So several hundred years in the future from when the events actually happened. But we do know that it is contained. It's referenced by many of the authors in the New Testament. So we get from this is that these men saw it as being inspired by God. So therefore, we can readily look at this and look at it as being truthful. A lot of people complain that a lot of the archaeological evidence isn't there. But the truth of the matter is a lot of the archaeological evidence isn't there for a lot of things, but things are found, and we're not looking at this as we do not look at this as a history book necessarily. We look at it as an example. Like, for example, the first part of it, as Joshua was given the message to the children of Israel, and he's talking to them, and hey, he says very specifically why they're just now coming into the promised land. And at the end of the chapter, which we spoke or the end of the book, like we spoke last week, we see another speech that's given to the Israelites, warning them and telling them to obey God's word, to always look to His word, to be in obedience to Him. And when we do so, then we are, we can be assured of something. But we got to be careful that we're not, that we don't look at this strictly as a history book, and it just talks about a great many stories. There's some great lessons to be learned. And there's some ways in which those lessons have been twisted, so we're going to look at those as well. Okay? But in chapter 2, we see where this is the account. It's probably one of the most well-discussed stories that we find in Scripture, and that's, of course, the story of Jericho, the Battle of Jericho. It's the first major battle after the Israelites begin their conquest of the land of Canaan. And we see, and we'll just go through the narrative here. It says, "And Joshua, the son of Nun, sent out 2 men from the acacia grove to spy secretly, saying, 'Go view the land, especially Jericho.'" Now, I want to make sure that we see this for what it is. We do not see where God told Joshua to send spies into Jericho. This is something that Joshua wanted to do. He decided to send these spies into Jericho. Now, could this be maybe a little bit of a remnant of maybe a little bit of fear or not necessarily a mistrust in God or distrust in God, but mainly maybe being cautious on the part of Joshua and the children? Yeah. And was Moses told to send spies into Jericho or into the land of Canaan? But did God tell him to send spies into Canaan? No. I believe this is human beings being human beings. He does not know, and part of what what do we really fear more than anything else is the unknown. We fear what we don't see, we don't know. As the spies were sent into Canaan so many years ago, here's Joshua doing it again. I want you to go I'm going to send these men in, and they're going to spy out the land. They're going to spy out the city and see what the fortifications. The truth of the matter is, though, if God is at the forefront of their battle, it really wouldn't matter what Jericho was made up of. It wouldn't matter what their fortifications were. It wouldn't matter what their manpower was. None of that would really matter because God is going to go before them into battle. And that's what that's the lesson that we can learn from anything else. As big as Jericho was, when they followed the word of the Lord, what happened? They were successful. Okay? They were successful. All right? So here we go again. All right? It says, "Go view the land, especially Jericho." So they went and came to the house of a harlot named Rahab. And harlot there means exactly what we think it was. She was a prostitute. And she lodged there. And this was told of the king of Jericho, saying, "Behold, men have come here tonight from the children of Israel to search out the country." So one thing that we know, the idea of the children of Israel, their reputation has preceded them, has it not? God cannot perform the kind of miraculous things that He did and the kind of acts of wonder and power that He did without the Word going in front of them. So as people were fleeing from them, as they were moving ahead of the children of Israel where they went, they're going to tell them, "Hey, there's people coming behind me," and it's entirely possible that their reputation has grown even bigger than the things that they were actually happening. You know how things go. Pretty soon, much like as the children of Israel went in and they came back with a story about these people were giants and we were grasshoppers in their sight. The truth of the matter is that's not really the case. But as the wheels in our mind begin to turn and begin to turn and begin to turn, we start inflating everything. Okay, so it's possible that by the time they got there, the word of the children of Israel was that there was, they were shooting fire out of their eyes, and people just fell to the ground in front of them, and all of these things going on. But the reputation is preceding them because they talk about the children of Israel, so they knew who was coming. So the king of Jericho sent to Rahab. So apparently her name has been mentioned. So he sends to Rahab saying, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the country." Now, Rahab had certainly let these people into her home, right? We know that. Okay? But what's happened? She knows what's going to occur. She knows what's going to happen. What's going to happen? Verse 4, it says, "Then the woman took the two men and did what? Hid them." All right. So, she said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from." Or, I'm sorry, I did not know where they were from. It happened as the gate was being shut, when it was dark, that the men went out. Where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you may overtake them. Now, see, here's the thing. A lot of people are really curious. Was it lawful? Was it lawful for her to lie to these men who came to her house looking for the men? Would that have been something that would have been acceptable? Well, we have to ask ourselves this question. If we are in the pursuit of right against unrighteous men, against wicked men, we're not talking about, did you run that red light? No, I didn't run the red light when you actually did. That's escaping true justice. Would it be lawful for us to lie in the service of justice and truth and decency? Is it lawful for us to do so? I put to you this. Let me ask you this question. We always go to this. Say, for example, we have a case where, say we found ourselves in the position of hiding someone where people were seeking to kill them. I'm put in mind of people who hid the Jews during the Holocaust. And we're hiding these people because we know what's going to happen to them. They're going to be murdered and they are innocent people, and they are going to be murdered. Would it be lawful for us to lie to the authorities and tell them that they are not there? Okay, so in the pursuit of justice and decency and honor and righteousness, I mean, we were talking about somebody who's going to be killed for strictly for simply being who they are, not for anything that they have done or anything like that. Would it be lawful for us to lie to the authorities and tell them that they're not there? Now, some people would say, well, that's situational ethics. I said, well, sometimes ethics are situational. Absolutely. Would it be lawful for us to lie and say that we didn't run a stoplight when in fact we did? Would that be lawful? No. Right. That's the question. And I want to make sure that we understand. We're not saying that it's not a lie. We're telling you point blank. I'm telling you point blank. Is it lawful to lie? And it would be a lie. I don't know where they are. Well, they're actually up in my attic. Okay, so there they are. Would it be lawful? How would God look at that in regards to our soul? Would He lay that lie at our feet as a condemnation of our soul? Mm-hmm. 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 Huh? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm asking because there are people who look at this and say that this was a lie that would have been condemned by God, in spite of the fact that she is sheltering two men who would most likely be put to death. I mean, see, now we don't know this, but it's a reasonable assumption that if she turned them over to the authorities, likely they would be killed. We don't know that, but likely they would be killed. They certainly wouldn't be allowed to go back to the children of Israel. They would be caught inside the city. Well, that's one of the things we've got to get. That's one of the things we're going to get to. We know that she made a bargain with the spies, and the spies followed through on their bargain. She said, just as for me, we know. I'll tell you what. Let's look a little bit further, and we'll go back to this because it's a genuine question, and it is something we have to think about. Yeah. Right. Right. In her mindset and in her culture, that probably would have been perfectly acceptable, and that's something to consider. But I guess my question is: say she wasn't. Say she. In the case of for us, for example, just thinking about it for just a couple of moments. As members of the Lord's church, we're bound by certain rules of conduct. We're bound by the laws of God first, and then of course by the laws of the state. And as long as those two don't contradict each other, guess what? Then we're going to be held to both of them. But where they conflict, where should our loyalties lie? Certainly on the side of God's law. And say, for example, this was us, and we had the ability and the foreknowledge to hide someone whose life would have been taken by wicked men, and they come to our house with weapons, and they say, "Where is he?" And we have, of course, two options. We can say either, "Well, I don't know," or I can say, "Well, he's in my basement in a secret room in my basement." What would our obligation be in regards to our obedience to God's law? Would it be to hand over someone and avoid the sin of lying, or would it be to lie in the service of saving an innocent's life from certain death? Have I stumped the Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. So you wouldn't give them shelter? Okay. Okay. I mean, that's why I'm asking the question. I'm just trying to find out where people are. Um, okay. Um, well, okay. I'll tell you where I would fall on this. We see where Christ breaks the law. He breaks the Sabbath law. And but what's it in the service of? It's in remember he and his disciples were walking through the fields, and it was on the Sabbath, and they took the heads of the grain, and they took the grain off, and they ate the grain. And of course, the people who wanted to parse the law. Well, you're breaking the Sabbath. But well, look, let's think about this. When David and his men went into the temple, and they took showbread, which was not lawful for them to eat, and they took and they ate it, but it was in the service of something that was righteous. They were hungry, and now the point of it, the point of this is going towards what is God's attitude? Are we guilty of the letter of the law, of the spirit of the law? Both of them are important, but when we even see where Christ, at the end of the day, he comes down squarely on the spirit of the law. I personally, this is my personal opinion, I believe that if we were to shelter someone as Rahab did, and we were to lie about it, I believe that God would not lie down at our feet. He would not require that of our soul. I don't believe that. Now, once again, that's Chuck's opinion. Don't go away from here telling people Chuck says it's okay to lie. I'm not saying that. I'm saying in the service of something that is greater. Okay, this is a different thing from saying, somebody coming in saying, say for example, you've got a car that's being, somebody's going to come and repossess that car, and they come and say, I'm looking for a car, and you say, well, I don't know where the car is, when the car's actually in the back of my yard, hidden under a tarp. That's not in the service of something that's greater. You're just keeping some guy's car from getting repossessed because he didn't pay the bill. That's a big difference. That's a whole different thing. But what we're talking about here is, of course, saving someone's life. I think about the people, and it's been shown that there were many of the many members of the Lord's Church who were active in the Underground Railroad back in the 1800s. And I think about it, how many times did they have to make a choice whether they were going to lie about something or whether they were going to say, no, I can't do it, I can't lie. Here they are, as they get dragged back down into slavery. And I think about something like that. That's a little, the idea of the Holocaust is a little bit closer to us than that was. But we think about as far back as we go. How far can we go? How far can the service of a lie go in something greater, so to speak? I just thought this is just like a curveball I'm throwing out into the just see what everybody has to say about it. Was her lie justified? I think it was, because she saved them from likely certain death. Irrelevant. It's kind of irrelevant to the conversation because I don't see us having that kind of an issue. But just in the off chance that something like that happens a little bit later on, I think we can kind of we lean more towards the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law, as Christ did. Because truthfully, working on the Sabbath was strictly condemned. But that's exactly what they were doing as they walked through the field and they took off the grain off the heads of the stalks. Where do we draw that line? And I'm going to talk about that here this morning, about the idea of judging, the idea of judge not. So like I said, this is just sort of an aside more than anything else. And everybody makes perfectly good points. Hey, don't put yourself in the position. Find something else. Find another way for them to do. Put them somewhere where you can honestly say, I don't know where they are. I honestly don't know where they are. Send them further down. There may be somebody who says, I don't care. Bring them to me. Okay, right. Here's an address. Go down that direction. That's where you need to be. Or yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, her faithfulness to the spies, yeah, she preserved their life. Yeah, I think God is always concerned with preserving human life, because to Him, every life that's preserved is a life that's a soul that has the potential to be obedient to Him. And we know where Rahab is listed in the lineage of Christ. I mean, she was part of. She didn't just merely. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll read it, and then we'll go a little bit further with it. You're right. It says. In verse 6, but she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order on the roof. Basically, she lived in the side of the wall of the city. Her house was located within the walls of the city. Then the men pursued them by the road to the Jordan, to the fords, and as soon as those who pursued them had gone out, they shut the gate. So we know that part of Jericho's fortifications was simply that. They were able to allow people in as they wished and let people out as they wished, and they were able to shut the gate up, and they weren't able to go any further. This was very common in this time in this area. Walled cities were an incredibly important part of that society. There was a constant warfare going on between these city-states, all of these places all over this region. So the smart thing to do would be to build a city that was self-contained, that was walled up with typically one, maybe two entrances in and out, and nothing more. So you could easily control the flow of people. So we see here a little bit more about the idea of Jericho. We also see where Nineveh was the same way. You know, even when Jonah was sent to Nineveh, many hundreds of years later, this was still the case. Walled city-states were the norm in this area. This was something that was unusual to the Israelites, and they didn't go in for this quite as much because, for one thing, God was working on their behalf, and for another, they liked kind of the open thing. But we know where Jericho had walls. This has been part of mankind. Hey, we want to protect ourselves. All right. So they shut the gate to the city of Jericho. All right. Now before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, "I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you." All right. So what do we see here? Their reputation has preceded them, hasn't it? As they're going, their reputation is going in front of them. People that are fleeing from them are coming into these cities, and they're telling them all of these stories about these children of Israel, and their God goes up before them, and their God is smiting their enemies, and all of these things. So we see where this is, which is, hey, this is kind of good, though, isn't it? This is what you want to see. God's actually softening up their enemies before he ever gets to them. In many cases, they would come to a city, and it would be completely empty because the inhabitants had fled. Okay? Jericho was a little bit more reluctant to do so. Okay? They had a little bit more pride, and they were not willing to give up their city quite as easily as many of the other people were before them. It says, "We've heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our heart melted." What does it mean? It says, neither did there remain what? Any more what? Courage. They'd lost their courage. They'd lost their hope. They'd lost their faith. Listen, you want to defeat an enemy without even having to shoot a single bullet? You know what you do? You get them where they don't feel like they can win. You get them in a defeated attitude. And when you've done that, they almost quit giving up any kind of resistance. So this is what God's doing. He's melting their enemies' hearts before them. And if you notice what he says, "I will drive out the inhabitants from the land." He certainly required something from them, but at the end of the day, God was the one that drove out the inhabitants of the land. He does this even when they march around the city of Jericho. God is driving out the inhabitants of the land before them. Exactly. Yeah. Well, the reason that he did it was because they were obedient to him. They did exactly as he told them to do. He gave them step-by-step instructions and said, "This is what you do." And when they did exactly what he told them to do, he did exactly what he promised he would do. So, I mean, this is a great lesson for us today. And I think I think that when we teach kids, when we give them this story, this is one of the things that we're trying to get across to them, is that God is great, God is powerful, and when we do what God tells us to do, God rewards us. He fulfills his promise to us when we are in obedience to him. Had the Israelites come short in anything that they did, would they have succeeded? I think we can reasonably say no. Yep. When Moses was told to speak to the rock, and instead of speaking to the rock, he smote the rock. God didn't punish the Israelites. He gave them water. Water came up. But Moses was under condemnation for not doing what he told them to do. Here we see where the entire nation was supposed to do that, and it's entirely possible that when they did not do what they were told to do, God would have given them a temporary defeat, and then he would have brought them back victorious. He would have taught them a lesson, and we'll see that with the Amalekites. When Achan seizes a portion of the goods, hides them in his tent, he allows them to be defeated, but then after they purge the evil, he sends them back out, and they win. Imagine that. So that's what happens. Excuse me. Neither did there remain any more courage in you because of you, for the Lord your God, he is God in heaven, above and on earth beneath. Man, she's making a confession that even today people don't want to make. You know, this is a pagan, idolatrous person who's living in a city filled with wickedness, and she's making a confession that's exactly what is required of us even today. God is God. We're required to acknowledge that Christ is his son. But here she's saying, your God is God. You know, we've seen what's happened. We've heard what he's done. No other God's been able to do this, so here we go. All right. Now, therefore, I beg you, swear to me by the Lord. Now, which Lord? Jehovah, right? Jehovah God. That's who I want you to swear to me by your God. Since I have shown you kindness, that you will also show kindness to my father's house, and give me a true token, and spare my father, my mother, my brothers, and my sisters, and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death. So the men answered her, our lives for yours. If none of you tell this business of ours, and it shall be when the Lord has given us the land that we will deal kindly and truly with you. Now, they could have gone up against Jericho without sending spies, but because they sent spies, a family was saved from true destruction. And the only family that we read of that is saved from true destruction, we don't read where anybody else was spared in the conquest of Jericho, but we certainly see where Rahab and her entire family, because of what they did for the spies, because she hid them for one, she didn't allow them to be captured for another. And the one last thing, they said, as long as you don't do what? As long as you don't tell us what we're going to do, as long as you don't spread our business, as long as you don't disseminate this information, then we will deal truly with you. And they did. That's exactly what happened. They brought out Rahab and her entire family, and they were integrated into the children of Israel. They were made a part of in every way, shape, or form. All right? In verse 15 it says, and then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall. She dwelt on the wall. And she said to them, get to the mountain lest the pursuers meet you. Hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Afterwards you may go your way. So the men said to her, we will be blameless of this oath of yours, which you have made us swear, unless, when we come into the land, you bind this line of scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you bring your father, your mother, your brothers, and all your father's household to your own home. So they're giving her some instructions, right? Hey, we got to know where you are. They're not going to remember. So you've got to tie the scarlet cord down, and your entire family has to be with you. You have to be together. We can't go through the city searching everybody out. So it tells us what? Our salvation depends on certain things that we have to do, right? I mean, that's an example to us. If we're going to be saved, there are conditions that we have to meet. And that's one thing I'm still baffled by so many people who absolutely will not believe that salvation requires anything on our part at all. Nothing in regards to works. You know, baptism is a work. Therefore, baptism is not essential because we're not saved by works, we're saved by faith. Well, here, you know, she had to believe that they were going to do what they said they were going to do, but she was also required to do something. Hang the scarlet cord out, get your whole family together in your house, and then we'll save you. We'll keep you from destruction. Yeah. Yeah. All right. All right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 I agree. There's something that's required of us. So, once she received this promise, was she faithful? Yeah. And we read where she was faithful. She did exactly what she was instructed to do. She was in obedience to God. I mean, I believe truly that she was in obedience to God by hiding the spies. She knew what was coming. She knew that God was the one that was going to rain down destruction on Jericho. This wasn't just a group of people who were going to come up and try to fight a war. God, the God of heaven and of earth, was going to be fighting on behalf of the children of Israel. She understood that, and she knew that you don't want to be found fighting against God. And that's exactly what would have happened had she not done what she did. Excuse me. In verse 19, so that it shall be that whoever goes outside the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we will be guiltless. And whoever is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head, if a hand is laid on him. And if you tell this business of ours, then we will be free from your oath which you made us swear. In verse 21, she agrees to these terms. And then she said, according to your words, so be it. And she sent them away, and they departed, and she bound the scarlet cord in the window. In the time leading up to this, you know what her thought was the entire time. She is the idea of being prepared for an eventuality, right? What was she doing? I mean, she was counting the days. She was making sure that everybody knew what was going on, that was supposed to know. And you wonder how many people she tried to get to come to that room and be saved from the destruction who refused, who said, no, Jericho will never fall. That'll never happen. Our city is too big. Our walls are too high. Our gate is well guarded. No one has ever come up against us and taken the city before. I don't believe that anything will ever happen. And I wonder how many people refuse to go into that room with her on that day of destruction. Christ makes reference not to Rahab and Jericho. He makes mention to it, right? Who's supposed to be in that inner room? Remember the foolish virgins and the wise virgins. And making your preparation, making sure that you are fully prepared for an eventuality. See, Rahab knew the eventuality of Jericho's fall. She knew that if the children of Israel are coming, and that God was going to fight their battle, then that city was doomed. There is nothing that could be done. She also knew that to leave the city and go somewhere else what would happen if all of a sudden, after the spies visited Rahab, all of a sudden Rahab and her entire family decide they're going to leave Jericho. How far do you think they would get? So she knew her only hope is to get a promise from the children of God, and that's exactly what happened. So the entire time she's busy and she's preparation. Make sure everybody knows what's going to happen. Make sure everybody knows where they need to be in order to be saved from this impending doom that's going to come upon the city. Okay? So, yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's... Yeah. So we think about that in reference to us today. Think about that in reference to us today. There's an eventuality that's coming. That eventuality is a judgment day. There's going to be a day of judgment. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to gather everybody together in one place. All right. There's a sign that's been set, and there's a people that have been set apart. And our goal is to, as they were trying to get people in that room, we're trying to get people into the church, the Lord's church, and make sure they understand that not every churches are not all the same, no matter what people might want to think. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we don't know. Thankfully, she did the right thing. I wouldn't want to find out. If you said, bind the scarlet cord, you better believe if I don't have a scarlet cord, what am I going to do? I'm going to be finding a scarlet cord. I don't care what it takes. How much is it? It's $2,000 whatever. Here it is. I've got to do it. So we do whatever it takes, no matter what it costs us, no matter what it might, and I would imagine, like I said, there's no telling if she said goodbye to a lot of people because they would not listen. Now, we do read where her family was saved, but how many other people could have been saved that would not obey? Okay. Well, she was telling, people who were going to spill the beans, the oath would have been null and void. Okay. All right, verse 22. They departed and went to the mountain, and they stayed there 3 days until the pursuers returned. So all these people have been out. All right. They've been out scouring the land for these spies. They know that the spies have come into the city, trying to find them. They went out 3 days' journey in all directions trying to find these spies, and 3 days, after 3 days, they all come back empty-handed, can't find them because all the spies were actually up in the mountains. But the pursuers sought them all along the way, but did not find them. So the two men returned, descended from the mountain, and crossed over, and they came to Joshua, the son of Nun, and told him all that had befallen them. And they said to Joshua, "Truly the Lord has delivered all the land into our hands, for indeed all the inhabitants of the country are faint-hearted because of us." So they're seeing where God follows through on His promise if they're obedient. Now they've been waiting. Remember, they've been wandering around the wilderness. So now, once they believe God and they do as He tells them to do, they realize, hey, God's faithful. God's going to do what He tells us to do. Absolutely. Okay. All right. So anything on chapter 2? We're going to real quick get into a little bit of chapter 3. Anybody's got anything else? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, because that's part of that's part of who we are. We're told not to lie. We're told not to do that. Liars are going. Liars have their part in the lake of fire. I mean, the Scripture tells us very specifically that that's the case. And the reason I put that out there, it's a question that's very real. I mean, it's not something this is not something that's so far out of the realm of possibility that we'll never really have to. It's like the idea of, like we said, what about somebody who's killed on their way to being baptized? The truth of the matter is, I don't know of any case that's happened. I'm not aware of any case that's happened. I've never been made aware. No one has ever posted any Brotherhood publication or anything like that has ever said, tragedy struck today. We had a brother or had a man or woman that was interested in becoming a member of the church, but on our way to the church, we were in an accident and they were killed. Nowhere have I ever heard anything like that. But, it's funny, people want to bring that up a lot. What about the person what if they happen, we're going to engage in a lot of what ifs. But the idea of lying in the service of something greater, something that's happened before, I mean, it is a very real thing. Thankfully, it's nothing I've ever been involved in. Any opportunity for lying I have, it's always usually been in my own self-service. So, yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where's my wife? I too. It'd be one of those things where she's here, but I'm telling you right now, you put one hand on that doorknob, and you're gonna have it to do. But that's the case though. That ethical dilemma has presented itself in the past. I look at the dilemma. If all sin is the same, then Christ walking through the fields, gathering on the Sabbath was as much a sin as lying was. But it was in the service of something better. David eating the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat. That was for the priests and the priests alone. It was left out for the day, and then it was gathered up, and then another piece was brought back the next day. But David ate that showbread, and it was not lawful for him to eat. But he did it because the men that were with him were hungry. So it was in the service of something that was greater, the idea of physical nourishment versus the importance of that showbread sitting on that table. But it just goes to show that dilemmas like that do present themselves, and what we have to do is we have to look and see what is God's attitude towards us, and what is God's attitude towards our actions towards someone, on behalf of someone. I believe that Rahab stood justified. For one thing, these were evil men who sought their lives. Yeah, yeah, now that was after the fact, but it doesn't change the fact that she did this in the service of something that was greater than herself. I mean, that was the whole point behind it all. She realized who these men were. She realized who they served, and she saw fit to to hide them and to tell the men that they've already left, they've already fled. Anyway, all right, we'll finish there, and then we'll pick back up in chapter 3 next week.